Control evaluation. An investor controls an investee if and only if the investor has all the following three elements: power over the investee, exposure or rights to variable returns from the investee, ability to use power over the investee to affect the investor's return. Combination of these three gives control over the investee. First one, power. An investor gets power over an investee if it has three elements: existing rights that give it, and the current ability, and the direct and to direct the relevant activities of the investee. The investor gets power over the investee if it has three elements. How to identify the relevant activities? Relevant activities are the activities of the investee that significantly affect the investor's return. Examples of activities related to operating and financing activities that can be related to relevant activities include, but does not limited to, selling and purchasing of goods and services, researching and developing new products and processes, managing financial assets during their life, including upon default, determining a fund structure or obtaining funding, selecting, acquiring, or disposing of assets, establishing operating and capital decisions of the investee, including budgets, appointing, terminating, and remunerating any investee's key management personnel or services provided. Current ability to direct the relevant activities. An investor would have current ability to direct relevant activities if that investor were able to make decisions at the time those decisions need to be taken. Current ability to direct the activities of an investee would, in all cases, arise from rights, that is, voting rights, potential voting rights, rights within other arrangements, or a combination of these. Rights that give power to an investor. Power arises from rights. The rights that give an investor power over an investee can differ. Investees can differ from investee to investee. Following are examples of various forms of rights that either individually or in combination with other rights can give power to an investor. First right, voting rights are potential voting rights of an investee. An investor holding majority of the equity share capital of an investee. Right to appoint, reassign, or remove members of an investee's key management personnel who have the ability to direct the relevant activities. An investor having right to appoint majority of the members of the board of directors who have power to take decisions related to relevant activities. Right to appoint or remove another entity that directs the relevant activities. Right with an investor to appoint or remove an asset manager who takes decisions related to investments or divestments by a venture capital fund. A right to direct the investee to enter or veto any changes to transactions for the benefit of the investor. A right with an investor to direct the investee to sell all its outputs to a group company of the investor at a price determined by the investor. Other rights, such as decision making rights, specified in a management contract that give the holder the ability to direct the relevant activities. It is the right related to relevant activities given to a single investor by all other investors through a shareholders agreement. What is the difference between substantive rights and protective rights? For the purpose of determination of power over the investee, an investor shall consider only those rights which are substantive. Protective rights are not considered for the determination of power. Substantive rights. Substantive rights can give the investor power over the investee. Protective rights do not give investor power over the investee. Substantive rights relates to the relevant activities of the investee. Protective rights relates to protect the interest of the party holding those rights without giving the holder the right over relevant activities of the investee. What is the effect of substantive and protective rights? If substantive rights are held by investor and protective rights are held by other parties, the investor has power. If substantive if protective rights are held by investor and substantive rights are held by other parties have power. If substantive rights are held by investor and substantive rights are held by other parties, further evaluation is required. Next concept, franchises. Salient features of a franchise agreement that indicates the right of franchises are protective rights. Franchises right do not give its ability to direct the relevant activities of the franchise. Other parties have current ability to direct the relevant activities of the franchise. Franchises' right do not affect the right of others to take decisions about relevant activities. Franchises operates the business for its own account. These are the features which portrays that franchises rights are protective rights. Next, voting rights. Power through voting rights. In most straightforward cases, the investor that holds most voting rights has power over an investee. However, there can be certain cases where an investor can have power even if it holds less than a majority of the voting rights of an investee. Power with a majority of voting rights. An investor that holds more than half of the voting rights of an investee has power in the following situations. The relevant activities are directed by a vote of the holder of the majority of the voting rights or a majority of the members of the governing body that directs the relevant activities are appointed by a vote of the holder of the majority of the voting rights. For example, in case of a company where the decisions related to relevant activities are taken by board of directors of the company and the board members are appointed by shareholders holding majority of the voting rights, then the shareholders holding majority of the voting rights have power over the company. Power without a majority of voting rights. There can be certain situations or cases where an investor can have power if it holds less than a majority of the voting rights of an investee. Following are examples of power without majority voting rights. Contractual arrangements with other vote holders to give the investors right to exercise voting rights which are sufficient to have power over the investee. Rights from other contractual arrangements relating to decision making of relevant activities. Such contractual rights in combination with voting rights may give investor power to direct the relevant activities. Size of investors holding of voting rights relevant to the size and dispersion of the holding of the other vote holders. The investor should also consider voting patterns at previous shareholders meeting to determine whether investor has power over the investee. Potential voting rights. These are the rights to obtain voting rights of an investee, such as those arising from convertible instruments or options or forward contracts. Those potential voting rights are considered only if the rights are substantive. Potential voting rights are to be considered in combination with voting or other decision making rights that the investor might have to assess whether investor has power or not. Combination of all of the above. These all are the examples of power without majority voting rights. Next, power other than through voting rights. When voting rights cannot have a significant effect on an investor's return, such as when voting rights relates to administrative tasks, only the investor shall consider following factors to determine whether it has power over the investee. Purpose and design of the investee, contractual arrangements, special relationship between investor and investee. Example, an investor can appoint or approve the investor's key management personnel who can direct the relevant activities. Next, the investor can direct the investee to enter or can veto any changes to significant transactions for the benefit of the investor. The investor can dominate either the nomination process for electing members of the investee's governing body or the obtaining of proxies from other holders of voting rights. The investor's key management personnel are related parties of the investor. Majority of the members of the investee's governing body are related parties of the investor.